Well, hello and welcome to another episode of More Perfect Marketing. It's David Baer here, and if you know what I spend most every day doing, then you'll know that one of the words that crosses my lips constantly is systems, systems and process. All right, I was actually going to say, and that lamp, because I had like this vision, and I see my guest like smiling because I think he knows that I'm referencing the jerk. Um, but the word systems is really at the core of a lot of what I spend my time on with clients, with a lot of marketing professionals, figuring out how do you actually accomplish consistently, predictably, the things that you're trying to accomplish in your business. Well, I want to dive into this subject with today's guest. Jack Turk and I were in a meeting earlier today, and he started talking about the systems around writing. Now, Jack's background is in sales copywriting and professional writing, technically, or technical writing, I should say, as well as writing books and courses. And we're going to dive into a little bit of what's behind some of the work that he has produced, specifically the systems that he has incorporated in his process from getting from nothing to wherever he ended up on those various projects. So, Jack, welcome.
David, so good to be here, and what a great topic to talk about.
Well, it's sort of a geeky topic, but I think it's also a really useful topic for a lot of folks who struggle with producing the things that are necessary in their business, but aren't necessarily the way that they want to spend their time, or they spend way more time than they ought to be, or they focus on the wrong activities than that they ought to. So I'm curious if you can sort of help break down the topic a little bit for us. And specifically, we're talking about, marketing and writing systems, but that's not where you started. You actually started in a different area. So why don't we sort of start with your story?
Okay. I originally went to college to become a scientist. I went into paper science, which sounds extremely boring and dull. It's the chemistry of how you actually produce paper. And I had to have a math minor. And then I saw and I kind of got it because I'm a weird, kind of weird, geeky, sort of technical sort of guy. And I liked science. I've always been into science. And But I saw this ad in student newspaper. It was like, "Can you be funny?" And I thought, well, that's interesting because I've always been a magician since I was a little kid. And I thought, oh, and I could make people laugh, And I thought, well, I could try to be fun. So I got involved doing a radio comedy show for the student radio station at Western Michigan University. And I had such a good time doing that I changed majors. I thought writing comedy is so much more fun than chemistry. And besides, organic chemistry is a real bear. If anybody has ever tried, it is Sargasso Sea of science, to be honest. If you really don't know what you're doing with organic chemistry, if you can't just muddle through organic chemistry. I just tell you. But writing comedy, that was fun. And for a couple of years, did a bunch of radio shows. One of the guys in the group was Tim Allen. So I knew Tim Allen back in college, and I still have friends with Tim Allen of Home Improvement. And I just had a great time. So I kept my math minor, got an English major with writing emphasis, did a lot of writing in college, and then got a job. My first job was like sort of a mundane auditor kind of job with a software company, with a computer company. And I wound up documenting how that job worked. And that got me my first job as like doing technical documentation. I was actually documenting a job. And I started doing software documentation because as I got into online systems, I started writing the manuals for that. The first manuals, my first boss actually told me that I had to write my first bunch of manuals longhand because we had typists at the company, and typists type and writers write is what she told me. So I had to write even though I could type 70 words a minute, I still had to write everything out in longhand and hand it to a typist to produce the final manual. Fortunately, that I got into a different gig after that.
Yes.
But
So you're talking about
so
productivity. That's
yeah, that kind of hit because I'm not really that fast a writer and I'm pretty messy. Um, so I got into the technical. I got doing technical writing. I did bounced around the computer industry and wound up at Microsoft eventually as a technical writer for the multimedia systems group. I was the lead writer for them. And then I was like the head of the. I was user education manager for multimedia systems at Microsoft. This is back in the early '90s, and I stood on stage with Bill Gates for the launch of the multimedia PC. I got to stand there and be ignored by him, and that was great. And got worked on. Then I got into program management. This is where I get into more systems and project management, and that was real. That's sort of the job. The program manager is the person on a software development team who basically makes it happen. Their job is to get the product out the door. And I learned some really important lessons about focus and prioritization and understanding how to scope a project and how to manage people and how to appreciate how to subdivide tasks that are really into measurable units and focusing on priorities and having a real clear vision for what you want to accomplish. Just side note, this is really important too. I did research at Microsoft as a program manager once when I was working on the games group, because I worked on Xbox games and all kinds of fun stuff too, as to what they always used to do. Project postmortems. At the end of the project, they do a postmortem, and before I kicked off my own project, I read through a bunch of other project postmortems. And the main reason that projects fail is a lack of a clear, consistent vision. And the team did not have the same vision. Like somebody thought they're going to build this thing. Some people thought they're going to build this thing, the other thing. And the whole team had disparate visions of what they really wanted to produce. And that crashed projects over and over and over again. And that's so important it is as a copywriter, if you're working for a client or you're working on your own stuff, that you have a clear vision for what you want it to accomplish.
Yeah.
And that's so important to have that one thing nailed down right from the very beginning.
Well, this is the start with the end in mind sort of thing. Like where do you want to get to? And then obviously there's what are the necessary building blocks to get there. And this is something I hope we'll dive into when it comes to copy. But the copy, sales copy for you came a little bit later because you sort of practiced a few other types of writing, technical writing.
Yeah, technical writing.
Yep.
Yep. I got into doing writing sales. I did some marketing stuff at Microsoft, not a lot, but I did some stuff there. And I did a little bit of marketing stuff for previous companies too. Primarily, I got into doing direct response marketing to promote myself as a magician. You see, I left Microsoft to become a full-time magician.
Which is an obvious next step.
Of course it is. Of course it is. I became a full-time magician, and I was Turk the Magic Genie, and I was doing 200 to 300 shows a year all around the Puget Sound area, primarily birthday parties, because that's what, let's be honest, that's what people think of with magicians. It's like for the kids, and so I did lots of kids shows and schools and that kind of stuff. I did some adult stuff too. But that's where I cut my teeth on learning how to write copy and understand how to promote myself. And I actually think that's a really good lesson for a lot of people who want to write copy or aspiring copy. Sell yourself first, because you believe in the product, you believe in the service, and it really forces you to be able to put that down in words and get that across, get that emotion across. So
you had this role of trying to get in front of people, tell them your story, tell them what you had to offer. So this was your first time actually selling something other than assisting on Microsoft projects. So
yeah.
I'm curious, sort of how did you approach it at the time? Because this was I'm assuming self-taught.
It was self-taught. I took a course from AWAI. I got involved. The reason I got involved with direct response, first off, was I saw an ad in like the Magician magazine, how to make $100,000 a year as a magician. And I thought, well, get my free report from Dave D. I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. Okay, so I got the free report, which of course was a sales letter, and for 197 or 290, whatever, I bought the initial course, which was all about how to create a business as a magician and sell your services using direct response copy. He had a bunch of examples. He taught some preliminary copywriting, and that was my first real deep dive into it and understanding, magnetic marketing, that whole principle. And I used all that stuff, and nobody else in my region was doing that kind of copy.
Yeah.
Nobody else. Yeah. And so that's where I really learned it. But I still learned the reason I was able to move so quickly on it is I was an accomplished writer, but I also approached writing systematically. Even at Microsoft, I approached writing systematically. And I learned that way back in college, writing a play, a really bad play. I'll acknowledge it was a really awful play, but the lesson it taught me was so valuable. It was my professor is still alive, believe it or not. But this is like way back when. I'm friends with him on Facebook. Arnie talked about how to outline a play beat by beat, and a beat is basically a dramatic moment in the play, in a story. And you identify all the dramatic moments and you structure them. And then when you write the play, you just write to each beat. You write the dialogue and the the stage direction, beat by beat by beat. And I was able to produce that play, and I'll admit it was a piece of crap, but I was able to jam it out in like basically one sitting, like 70 pages. And I did it so quickly, and it just shocked me how quickly I was able to produce that script by applying that system to the process. And I use that lesson in technical writing. I would outline my books. I outline manuals basically using what was called a two-page spread. So like you open up the manual and you had the 2 pages faced, each side would explain a beat of information essentially that you would comprehend, whether it was for programmer documentation, whether it was for the user interface. And I outlined the entire manual beat by beat. I wrote the entire manual for Age of Empires, 140 pages in under 10 days by organizing in that process.
You bring up the playwriting experience, and it reminds me of a book that I read not too long ago, about musical theater, which is another passion of mine that I never talk about on this show,
Oh,
and the structure, the framework of a successful musical, and that there are certain songs that appear in a certain order. There's the I Want song. There's these different moments that happen in the framework of a musical, and why some musicals that diverge from that structure, or many musicals that do, have failed because they don't do the necessary things to get the audience to follow along, to lean in, to be interested in the character, to understand the motivation of a character, etc. And so we're talking about systems, but I think systems, as you've just described it, also relate to formula or framework, or things that are proven, that if we simply leverage, we can obviously get to where we're going more effectively or more efficiently.
Oh, absolutely. Systems can be just, the attention, interest, action, decision, action. That's AIDA, attention, interest, decision, action. That's a system. You follow, it's a framework. Why not follow systems? It makes life so much so much easier. And they're also proven. You're not trying, you have to know if you're doing painting, if you're like into that, you have to understand perspective, all kinds of things you're not approaching it like I'm going to reinvent the wheel on everything. By working within a system, within a framework, you have plenty of opportunity for creativity.
Yeah.
If that's and I certainly think there's obviously a creative process to writing and coming up with headlines and coming up with bullet points and everything else. But by having systems in place, it gives you something to hang that hat on.
So let's talk a little bit about the systems that you use. Now we're jumping ahead in your story, but you've taken what you learned selling yourself, and ultimately there's sort of a next step in that magician story, which is that I think you bought that entire business that Dave had, that where you bought that course from him. Um,
Yes.
and so I imagine that you then became the teacher. You were now in the role of teaching other magicians how to build their businesses. Did you go deeper into the how to sell yourself through persuasion and writing there, or
Oh,
how did
well, again, I had to create, I created courses on how to do, how to market yourself on the internet. I created doing SEO and Google AdWords and that kind of stuff, how to create websites. I had multiple events that I promoted. What that really, and I had a ton of, I bought Dave's thing and I had a bunch of products. And what it taught me was how to do marketing, information marketing. So there's marketing for yourself, which is like, I'm my service, buy my service first. And then I also added to that a layer of understanding information marketing, which is like creating a list, building a list of Dan calls it your herd. I don't know, just your friends, your client, whatever, prospects, whatever you want to call that list is. Building that list, creating a relationship with that list, keeping interest high in that list, communication. I did all learning email marketing, learning how to do launches, they didn't have webinars back then, but teleseminars, all this stuff, and putting offers in front of people, doing direct mail. This is all stuff I hadn't done, really didn't need to do much with the marketing of the service as a magician.
Mhm.
But when I had that as an info business, that taught me, it expanded my expertise and my awareness of other types of marketing in a whole different way.
Yeah, yeah, and so all of those things that you mentioned, you can talk about them generally, but it's a lot easier to grasp when you have an outline and when you have a step by step, do this first, do this next sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
And this is something that you have then moved on to practicing as you became a writer for hire. And I imagine that you created systems for yourself to be either things that you had learned that you continued to do, or things that you discovered work for the way that you like to work. And I'm sort of curious to understand, the transition to being a writer for hire. Um, what are the types of things that you systematized to be able to deliver the thing that the service that you were selling?
Basically, the whole process of researching and thinking about uh, the prospect, understand. Again, we're both fans of breakthrough advertising and Gene Schwartz, and honestly, I hadn't even heard of Gene Schwartz. When I got started doing all this stuff,
Mhm.
and I'm very grateful for Brian Kurtz and his whole Titans universe to enlighten me about that stuff, because that's extremely valuable
Yeah.
and a whole deeper level than I had ever encountered before. But I still created a process of really digging into the heart and soul of the prospect. A bunch of questions I would ask myself and try to understand, doing research about who they are and what do they care about, and what's scaring them, what's keeping them awake at night, and just putting yourself in their shoes. And it's easier. It's easier, for me. I got started with that, essentially doing that with my primary audience as a magician was moms.
Mhm.
And they were professional women, at least here in the Seattle area, the Greater Puget Sound. Most of them, I picked Microsoft because that was like, I had a lot of experience working with people at Microsoft, but all the high tech here, and I knew what their lives are like. I had thought through, what's it like? You got to go, you're gone a lot. You work your tail off. You love your job, but you work your tail off and you got kids and you love your kid. I mean, and sometimes you feel a little guilty about, so I really thought about what feels a little guilty. And you think about, just really think and just keep asking questions. Think about, like, one thing I came up with that I don't think, I know very few other magicians ever thought of, was like, imagine this, you're going to invite a stranger into your home to hang out with your little kid. with your child and other children. What does that take? There's a level of trust. Like, you don't invite strangers to your home.
Hmm.
I mean, you think about that. It's like you're some weirdo who likes magic. I
Yeah.
mean, that's like already like, as far as my lovely wife would say, that's really got so to get off on the deep end. Some clown likes magic. So you have to overcome that potential. You have to understand that's there. Whether they really think about it a lot or not, it's really there.
Hmm.
And really understand what's going on in their head. Like what fear, because they're risking a lot to have some stranger in their home with their children,
Yeah.
And so it's important to relieve those fears and, make sure they feel, hey, you can feel safe. In fact, I'm go above and beyond, make you feel safe. And I respect you and I understand you, etc. So that's, I think, really helped me. That kind of thing, even just doing it for birthday parties,
Hmm.
really got me thinking about that in a deep way.
So research, is something that I think in your world doesn't happen nearly enough. But the fact that you've prioritized it, that you said that was something that you did at the beginning of a process, then you have all this information and you got to figure out, okay, how do I take what I have and how do I add, figure out what else I need to add, and then how do I put it into its final form
Mhm.
to as they say in your world of writing, to ship it, right? And
Mhm.
so I'm sort of curious, did you know what to do with that? Did you have to sort of, work through the process? Did you have structures in front of you that you could emulate, or templates that you could insert stuff into, or did you have to make this stuff up?
I bought temp. I mean, I did. I bought writing courses. I bought tons of writing. You know, I hardly recommend. You should get anytime if you're into copywriting, you should buy everything you can find on copywriting because everybody's got at least one insight that you hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
The good, the great ones for sure. I got Carlton's program. I got everything by Dan Kennedy. I got John Carlton's stuff. I got, like I said, I got got stuff from AWAI. I mean, I got stuff from Dave. I got, all kinds of stuff. I just kept buying. And I also started, I mean, this is something I hardly recommend in my program too, is like start saving junk mail. Always start saving junk mail, because if it's something that a company has invested tens, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars into producing and mailing, it's probably halfway decent, or at least there's something there you can use, you can learn from. So start saving that, build up a swipe file that you can take. And that's honestly, that is one of the first steps that's in the whole systematic process
Hmm.
that I have. Like one of the first things I do, obviously, get into the head of really understand the customer, and then it's start collecting stuff and start answering questions. Because this is the point. Copy is not written; it's assembled. This is Eugene Schwartz. Copy is not written; it's assembled. So you start systematically pulling together all the pieces, answering all the questions, and just get them out there in front of you. Like start things like, what's the guarantee? What is it? Is there a guarantee? Is it 100% money back? Do you have to send in the product or whatever? Is it totally unconditional? Is it double your money back? Whatever. These types of things, start answering those kind of questions.
Hmm.
Really nail down the offer. In fact, I think the offer is, and I know Brian will go 100% on this. Like, you can have kind of a crappy copy. You can have kind of a crappy list, but if you've got an offer, I know that kills. I know what was it? Halbert said, "What's the key to selling hamburgers on the beach? A starving crowd."
Yeah.
You know, you get a starving crowd, and like you got the right offer for the start. You got hamburgers to a starving crowd. You got like it's nothing. It's nothing to sell. So the offer is just hugely important to really put your time into that. Um, Systematic, again, that's all systematic though. You don't want to start before you've really thought through the offer. You shouldn't start writing before you have the offer in mind. Again, the end in mind.
Yeah.
You really should know all aspects of the offer in place. You really should know all the main features and benefits of your product in play or service Have that down in place. You should really have like guarantee and what you want them to do, like the call to action. That's got to be nailed down 100% in place before you start writing. Again, that's like systematically you start getting all these pieces. Now, whether you do it what first, second, third, I think that's up to you. You know how you want to. I think there's a lot of flexibility in what you do first, but I think you really got to know you got to know who you're selling it to. You really got to know that person because are you hitting that pain point they got?
Yeah. Well, I love this. Okay, so you know the person because you've done the research. You've figured out exactly where you're leading them to at the end, how they're to redeem it, what your promise is to them, and then sort of there's all of the stuff in the middle that you have to figure out. Well, it's not in the middle. It's the how do you get their attention in the first place, and we'll get to that in a couple of
Mm-hmm.
minutes. But then there's sort of building the argument toward why this is something they should pay attention to,
Mm-hmm.
well, to use the ADA approach that you were using, earlier, for
Attention.
example, right? So why they should pay attention to it, and then what's the argument for why this for them, why now, and all of those other pieces, and it, as you said earlier, compiling it more than sort of sitting there and trying to figure out, oh, what the heck am I going to write next?
Mm-hmm.
It makes
It
it
makes it so much easier.
yeah.
It just makes it so much easier if you try to start from a blank page. You're 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 just hosed. I mean, without any ammo. I mean, the copy is like it's like the old iceberg. You only see the finished sales letter is only a little tip of the
Mhm.
iceberg that you see, but you've done all this stuff beforehand to be ready for that.
So I want to get to the how do you get their attention in the first place, and for those who are interested in knowing what I'm referring to, I'm specifically referring to the headline, which we're just going to talk about in a moment. But I'm going to create an open loop here, just a little
Okay.
copywriting jargon, because I want to change the subject completely. You just came back from a family vacation, and
Indeed.
you spent time in a place that is famous for a lot of things: customer service, customer delight, experience, etc., but also equally famous for how they have systematized so much of the business. And I know that you're, to a certain extent, a student of the sort of stuff they do behind the business as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, what system based story might you be able to share, either from this or a previous visit to one of the favorite destinations for you and your family, the happiest place on earth?
Oh, Walt Disney World is. We've been going. I went on my honeymoon back in 1980. I've been going ever since. Took the kids there probably started going 93 and have gone taking the kids there forever. Now my kids have got kids, and so it's like been the thing. I've created monsters. I guess that's they don't expect us all to go. What they do, they're extremely good at maintaining communication with you before the event, before actually showing up, and that they had consistent messaging. About trying to here's some stuff to think about before your visit. I mean, they didn't just take the reservation and like leave it at that. It was they were romancing you all the way up to that moment. And when you got there, the TV screen said "Welcome, Jack," and da da. So they had that. It was all that was personalized. Um, every it's such an interesting place, and how they control the environment, they control your interactions. But honestly, one of the best lessons I got on systems that I think I hadn't noticed before was seeing an entertainer named Yeehaw Bob, who is a piano guy
Piano guy, yeah.
at our resort, and we've seen him. I've said, gosh, probably been 20 years since I've seen him the first time, and he's just gotten better and better. But what I loved about Bob is that not only does he have chops as a entertainer, and he does, he's an amazing pianist and has got amazing memory for playing song after song, and even do people do requests. I mean, just boom, 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 boom. But how he prepares the audience before he even starts. He got there like a half hour early and started getting ready for, and then before the show started, he went out. It was like in a little bar. So it was in a bar at the hotel. And he walked throughout the entire area and talked to every single table and asked them where they're from, found if there are any birthdays, et cetera, and got their names. And he basically sort of warmed up the crowd himself before, but it was a very calculated exercise on his part. I could see exactly what he was doing. He was building a bond and building a relationship with everybody there before he even started. He had one key. He was romancing everybody in that crowd before he even started to play the piano.
Yeah.
And he built upon that he leveraged that information. He did the research. He found out what was in their heads, what was in their hearts. And throughout the show, he'd like make notes, shout outs to the group from Ontario, or the group from Texas, or whatever, and like somebody's birthday. Let's all say, and he kept doing. And I've seen the show lots of times, and like, just to let you know, like a good performer, particularly I've seen Tim Allen perform a number of times as well. I've gone to his, stage shows and watched him do his stand-up routines. And I performed thousands of magic shows, and literally thousands of magic shows. And you get really good at doing the same thing over and over and over. So there's almost no variation. You have a very set, you find out what works and you build off that, and it just goes boom, 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 boom. And he had systematized his act.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole experience.
Yeah, I'm glad that you shared that story, because that was the one that I had read recently that you posted on LinkedIn that I was hoping you would share when I asked that question.
Well,
So thanks so much for that. I had promised earlier that we might talk about how you get someone's attention, particularly in the written form. So why don't we wrap up by talking a little bit about the important, or I guess what David Ogilvy called, the critically important, piece. What was it, 80%
yeah.
of a sales letter is thanks to this particular component. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but
I think this is where the rubber hits the road, David. And I don't know if I have a system for that. I think it comes out of understanding what's going on in their head, what is the conversation going on in their mind, as how the quote goes, entering the conversation going on. So what are they thinking at that point in time? When I wrote my headlines for my website for the birthday party, I knew what was the way I looked at it was like, nobody is thinking about hiring a magician. Nobody, no professional woman at Microsoft who's like a program manager or a marketing director or whatever is coming home after a hard day at work thinking about a magician. It's like last thing. And then she realizes Saturday at 2 p.m., Johnny's going to have his 7th birthday, and I'm going to have 35 7-year-olds and 6-year-olds in my house for 2 hours, and I don't know what I'm going to do. Oh my God, what am I going to do? And that's the moment. That's what I wrote in my headline, is that addressing that fear. So when they were Googling whatever birthday party magician and they saw my site, and my tagline, and I honestly forgot what I was writing. How to make your child's birthday party unforgettable, guaranteed.
That's pretty compelling for the person that you just painted an image of.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they want. They want my guarantee was, um, your walls will rock with laughter. And I delivered on that. I did deliver on that every time. My birthday, the birthday party word loud is that word loud. If you wanted a quiet, artistic magician, that wasn't me. But if you want your walls to rock with laughter, that's what you're going to get. And that's how I spoke to that. And so the big idea really boils down to, I think, capturing what's going on, really understanding. And there's probably in a lot of people, a lot of markets, and et cetera, whatever. There's not just one thing. I'm not going to say there's only one big idea can work for any product or any market.
Mhm.
But I think you got to have a big idea. You got to have a hook, and that's what they talk about. It's the hook. You got to have something that does speak to something that really is, eating at their soul at that moment. And that's what you got to be
Yeah.
thinking about that.
Yeah. You've started to help guide others, whether it's business owners, entrepreneurs, or budding copywriters through the process of building out their own systems for doing this sort of thing. And you have created a great little guide specifically around what we've just been talking about headlines. You want to talk about that?
Oh yeah, it's very simple. I created a real simple little system, 3 steps to creating a killer headline. Now I'm not so say it's going to not going to help you build an entire letter or anything, but it'll help you come up with some really solid ideas for coming up with headlines. And you really should come up with a lot of headlines. I mean, it's not a bad idea to just spend, an hour, a couple hours thinking about big ideas, thinking about headlines, and just writing them all out, and then use that. And you'll want to, of course. And I'm a big fan of, like, you got to test. Everything's got to be tested. You can't do it. But I've created a nice little toolkit. It's very simple. It's very short and sweet and fun. And it's available on my website, which is at. If I can I give the?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's writekillercopyfast.com. writekillercopyfast.com /3, the number 3 steps.
Awesome. We'll of course have a link to that in the show notes as well, but writekillercopyfast.com /3 steps. And it's called 3 Steps to Writing Powerful, Compelling Headlines in Record Time, which is brand appropriate for you, I guess.
Yes, it would be. Yeah. I try
Awesome.
to be consistent, but I'm not always,
Jack Turk, this has been an awesome conversation, and I really appreciate you humoring me with my request to talk about systems, because I think that it would help so many businesses out there who struggle to achieve the things that they want to achieve if they just sort of step back and say, all right, what is a more effective way for us to get to where we want to go to. And I think, systematizing things is often, not always, the answer. So thanks for walking us through your experience with one of my favorite words.
It was my pleasure, David. I thank you very much for graciously inviting me to share.
Indeed. Hey folks, this has been More Perfect Marketing. If you know somebody who might benefit from listening to the conversation you've just heard, please by all means share it. In the meantime, this is David Baer, and I hope to see you back here on another episode real soon. Take care.